Ahi, Chapter 47, The Dragon's Pet. Pointing towards the cabin, Ahi asked, "Who is the girl?" "My pet human. I found her abandoned in the forest, and I made her a tiny house and everything to keep her safe from the element. I am currently trying to teach her new tricks," he said, pointing towards the little house. On top of the doorway there was a giant sign with runes scribbled onto them, and based on a rudimentary knowledge on this dragon's particular dragon script, it read Heidi. Borgilda and Ahi took a second look at the house and started laughing, and Clematis chuckled as well, proud of his well-formulated joke. He was indeed a very unusual alabaster dragon. Then again, their aggressive nature made it very rare to see one of their kind reach the age of an elder dragon. And all elder dragons had certain commonalities. They were docile, adaptable, cautious, and usually bored. And if boredom was not treated quickly, it degraded into depression. Clematis' laughter was suddenly cut short, and his eyes clouded deeper charcoal, and pointing towards the exit, he said, "Your presence annoys me. Be gone." He added, looking at us, "All of you." Not desiring to argue, Brunhilde went into the water, and Ahi stood on her back, and she swam her way out of Clematis' home as quickly as her legs could paddle. Summer had finally arrived in the northern continent, and all of the nature and fauna had burst to life, and there was the overabundance of fairy, fruits, and animals. The silver dragons had finally shaken off their winter lethargy, and they were actively hunting along the coastline and in the forest. The whole flight of them had traveled to this region, and in this coast there was a large gathering of marine life, and hunting was easier there since the fishes there were swept up by a large current from the east and back northward. And the place was also a breeding ground for seals, and it also had plenty of salmon, shrimps, and lobster. Titanless was quite the prosperous port city, and its main export was shrimp, salmon, and furs, and it had a trading missions all over the coastlines in the northern continent. Titanless was the capital of the Federation of the Huracan, and this federation had been forced by the unification of 6 warring tribes, and we use warring in the mildest sense, and the winter hardships never allowed for the conflicts to reach cataclysmic proportions. And these were old-fashioned disputes over land, women, and resources. However, most battles were usually resolved among the tribal chieftains without much bloodshed. And about 281 years ago, the southern tribes were attacked by an ambitious warring tribe from the western part of the continent, and to fend off invaders, the Huracan Federation was founded. It had been in working order since then, and like other tribes, the Federation shared similar cosmological beliefs, and they were also slaves to their tradition, and this slavery helped maintain something that could be called order. And as per tradition, his party had to settle in the outskirts of the city. The city was a few miles away from a dead volcano, and the locals called it Mount Chesta. And only the dragons knew the mountain was actually a volcano, and the volcano had innumerable amount of tunnels, and the interior was lined with precious minerals and gems like obsidian, honey, agate, onyx, peridot, and most importantly, gold. Dragons typically did not appropriate each other's nesting ground, and the summertime was also the time of courtship for the silver dragons. However, the female silver dragons never made it until their litter was fully grown, and even then some of their kind maintained perpetual virginity. And due to the female-speaking nature, it was not too uncommon for male silver dragons to crossbreed with other more willing specimens. And today Mildred came to discover his cave had been occupied, and a large part of the other cave had been appropriated by the unwelcome alabaster dragons. And there was about 25 nesting grounds inside the mountain, and as was a commonality among the alabaster dragons, they had a wide-ranging territory. And the end result was that their entire kin had lived in one of the most resource-abundant mountains in the entire region. The silver dragons naturally shunned conflict, and like the humans natives, they were slaves to their own ways. And Mulder was flying with he and Brunhilde on his back, and his attention was drawn by a gathering of his kin at the base of the mountain. And this was unusual since his kin rarely got together to do much of anything. And Mulder landed on top of a flat stalactite rock, and he asked the dragons closest to him, "Uria, what is going on?" "And those bastards gone up and taken over our whole mountain," said Uriel angrily. and female silver dragon had a larger mane and smaller horns and frame, but larger wings than their male counterparts. Are we going to do something about it? Asked Mildred. Doesn't look like it. It's the start of the summer, and the men don't seem too eager to fight over such trifling matters, responded Uriah, sighing. And Mother sat a moment, folding his cloth, and he climbed onto his head to get a better view of the situation. The problem wasn't so much that there wasn't enough room for everyone. Rather, alabaster dragons were territorial, and the silver dragons were not. And despite not being territorial, the silver dragons were outraged by the loss of their home. So, like, the silver dragons would be willing to share space with the alabaster dragons, but the alabaster dragons don't like sharing space. So then you see the problem. He raised his hand and said, "Guys, I have an idea." The dragons turned slightly to pay attention to the little Ahi, and with everyone's attention, he said, why don't we try brutalize aggression? And that is, as Mildred somewhat amused. And have you ever seen two cats fighting for territory? They start out with some yelling and a display of power. And the trick is to both avoid any actual fighting, said as he punched in the air. This is stupid. We're not animals, and we're certainly not cats, snapped Uriah. Could for me, said as he chuckling, and he added, the humans' non-violent approach involves cities, marching, labor strike, hunger strike, boycotts, other goods, etc. Huh? Said Uriah, thinking, and the other dragons too were pensive. And after analyzing their options, Mildred said, let's take the animal approach. And humans have tried the non-violent thing on King Bersamin for years, and he hasn't made a dent in his empire. And honestly, there comes a time when a man has to be a man. Any strategy that relies on the goodwill and compassion of one's adversary is doomed to fail from the start, said he agreeing with him. And one of the elder dragons in the group asked in a mocking tone, so how do we go about this? Do we imitate the wolf and send our betas to bite their feet and then flee? Or do we kill their younglings to show them who's boss? Just follow my lead, said he, changing into the form of a dragon. And he flew and he faced the open mouth of the first cave. And he spread his wing and the others did the same. And then he started roaring and the other dragons following suit. And this was an unusual behavior of the super refined silver dragons. The humans entirely were deeply unnerved by the noise created by the usually pacifistic dragons, and even the Habadias were in a frenzy. They were leaving the tree homes and making their way towards the ocean. And the birds in the forest too were leaving because they were frightened by the silver dragon's unusual behavior. He showed his claws and he breathed smoke into the air, and the noise and the smell of burnt sulfur mingled with the icy blue flame of the silver dragons finally caught the attention of the alabaster dragon. The alabaster dragons were not as unified as the silver dragon clique, and they were showing signs of aggression towards one another, especially among the young males. And the 25 that had showed up kept a respectable 10-meter distance from their peers, and he made a sign to the others, and they stopped making noise, and he climbed on top of the rocky surface of the mountain to face the first alabaster dragon. And he was a young male, about 60 years old. And the alabaster dragon sat up on his hind leg, and he folded his arms, and he looked down on the silver dragon, which were numbered 50 adults and 21 children. And barking, he said, and have you people gone feral? What happened to the dignified Albion race? And you bring shame to Dragonkin. And he spat slush at the dragon's feet and snapped, and you may look down on the feral race, but you cannot change the fact that we lie on top of the fortune, my good friend. The alabaster dragon frowned and then sneezed, and there were fumes rising from the sludge that he had spat near him. And the dragon flapped his wings, and he flew a few meters away from Ahi. And Ahi made a sign to the others, and they started invading the personal space of the alabaster dragon. And some of the silver dragons snapped their fans, and others breathed icy or lightning, and some even went as far as using magic. And this ritualized aggression was orchestrated in a way to show their power while avoiding any actual fighting. And when all of the alabaster dragons had retreated further up the mountain, he said, and we should be able to get back inside now. His ritualized violence actually proved effective, and in time, this newly developed nasty neighbor effect among alabaster dragons. This meant that the alabaster dragons maintained the usual hostility towards one another. However, they tolerated the presence of the silver dragons. And while things had finally settled up in the mountain, the city of Talik was in turmoil. Seers and magicians were coming from over the Federation to interpret the ill omen. And Mother was somewhat inclined to explain things, however the others refused to in order to save face. And to bring matters to a close, the citizens of Talik decided to offer a sacrificial virgin to the dragons, and no one knew where this stupid bizarre tradition had originated, and the silver dragons were also not inclined to turn down a fresh addition to their pack. And as we said, it was not too uncommon for male silver dragons to crossbreed. Today at Hembro Hill they were attending the shooting, and they were serving as the acting representatives of the silver dragons, and the shooting took place in the temple at the base of the mountain, and ideally all the virgins were chosen from all levels of society. However, it was not too uncommon for the names of the nobles to be taken out in exchange of a hefty sum. And there were 100 maidens to be chosen from, and from 21 of them were true virgins. And the virgins were dressed in cotton white, sleeveless dresses, and a white veil decorated with white anemones. And the temple was a circular series of posts and lintel stones, and at the center there was a round altar with a fire burning. And there were 4 other large stones facing the 4 cardinal points, and a Hembro Hill that was sitting before the fire facing the maiden, and there were 3 high priests dressed in blue robes without hoods, and they were wearing a poncho over it, and they had plenty of obsidian ornaments. And one of the priests was a blindfolded maiden, and she held up in her lap a small urn with an opening enough to fit 2 hands, and each girl was supposed to go up to there and reach for a small circular rune. The rune was then presented to either priest, and during the choosing a different rune was used, and this meant to prevent the cheating during the choosing. And like all lotteries, this one was rigged, and there was always only 1 rune within the urn, and the blindfolded maiden held the runes beneath her sleeves. And the name of each maiden was always announced, and when the chosen maiden spoke her name, the blind priestess would slip the rune into the urn, and this was a clever trick to be certain, but none of the locals were ever that observant. And by now they were out to the last 10 maidens, and he was busy dozing off, and Brunhilde was drawing the participants, and suddenly he looked up and he heard the name Jefine of the clan Jaconi, and she was the name that they were waiting for, and like her namesake, Gefion was a farmer. And this first of farming was somewhat possible, and her family had sold her for some cliché reason or other, and Gefion was a stout but somewhat novice 12-year-old girl. And she was also illiterate, and this was quite commonplace in this continent, and written language was more of a fad among the priestly class. And Brunhilde looked up from her work, and shaking her head, she said she couldn't help but comment on the malnourished girl that they were offering up. Pity, said he, another mouth to feed. Gefon was trembling for her to tell. As far as she knew, all humans that were sacrificed to the dragon were never heard from again. And she wasn't a bad-looking lass, with big, expressive black eyes, a small nose, thin lips, and raven black hair. And for the dragon, she was a useless specimen as far as mating was concerned, for the human females were only potential breeding partners in their mid-20s. And Mother was one of the few among his kin who wanted to enlighten the poor humans. However, his kind had isolationist tendency, as well as they did not interfere in the events of other sentient species. They simply watched events unfold like a bad soap opera. And there was also the popular belief that dealing with humans on the same level would diminish draconic dignity, whatever that was. After being back for a few years, Mother was finally remembering why he had left his kind in the first place. And Gerfa had gotten the ill-fated rune, and like we had all expected, and the water would soon follow, and kissing at his feet, she begged for her life, and shaking her shoulders as he said, "Stop crying, you'll be fine, nothing bad's gonna happen to you." And looking at, she regained her composure and said, "Really? Oh, thank you." "It's okay," said he, patting her head. "If you don't cry, listen to what's going to happen. I'm going to take you back to the rendezvous point, and a healer is going to fix you up and feed you a meal." "I don't need a healer," said the girl, taken aback. And he was making reference to her untreated broken leg. Though not visible, her left wrist also had been healed poorly. And she was also developing organic dust toxicity syndrome. And it sounds bad, but this syndrome usually only lasts for 1 to 5 days. And this seems to have flu-like symptoms, and it only affected farmers. Needless to say, the barn she worked in required better ventilation. And face masks also helped. Boy, their form was a real mess. and the rouge color added to her lips and cheeks were not making her look any livelier. In fact, they were having the opposite effect. Brunhilde started laughing and thrashing at our observation, and she had forgotten she was in her human form, and one of the priests spoke her with a rod and said, ahem. Brunhilde quickly quieted down and regained her composure, and from time to time her shoulders would shake and her face twisted into a grimace as she tried to restrain her laughter. The other priest struck Ahi in his hand to make him let go of the sacrifice, and Ahi and the rest of us dozed off during the rest of the ceremony. And we frankly specialized in nature shows, and we had no interest in human affairs. And Ahi tensed up for a moment, and we awoke for a second later, and the blind priestess was creating a mixture of coca leaves and maize beer. And he asked the priest, what's with the beer and drugs? If you're making it for me, know that I won't have it. The priestess stoically ignored him, and after he asked a second time, she answered in a harsh voice, it's not for your grace, it is for the sacrifice. The priest chose our way of sending her off painlessly, and he folded his arms, and looking at us, he asked, is it just me, or are they really going to kill the girl? And we nodded in response, and he stood between the girl and the high priest, and he raised his head and folded his arm in defiance, and his blood-red eyes were burning twin charcoals for added effect, and he screamed at the priest, and do not kill your children out of fear of one, and human sacrifice is a sinful act of those who have gone astray. The priest and others present cowered and bowed. But it was you who desired human sacrifices, Great One, said the priest. Don't blame this one on me. I just came here as a favor, and I'm tired of putting up with your nonsense, and I'm trying really, really hard. So what is your excuse, said he angrily, and he added, we're taking girl with us now, back, alive. The crowd was speechless, and Brunhilde changed into her dragon form and shot fire into the air for added effect. He went to Gelfond and he placed her over his shoulder, and he climbed on top of Brunhilde and then set up Gelfond in front of him. And he held Gelfond with one hand, and with the other he held on to Brunhilde's mane. And before departing, he said, let it be known that from this day forward all human sacrifices are outlawed, and whoever performs this deed is accursed, and this is not a threat but an oath, and an oath you will sign with your victim's blood. He was scary when he was genuinely angry, and whenever he was angry, he spoke like our blood red. Our blood red was currently in the midst of its maiden voyage in Vanamione, and without King Bersamen, the continent had regained its ancient name, and there were other names currently being used. However, Vanamione was the name we liked. And he put pressure on Brunhilde's side, and she flew out towards the mountain, and Brunhilde was still small in comparison to her peers. However, her body was larger than a mule, and her wings were 4 times as big. While flying, Brunhilde arched her head backwards in an unnatural form to shoot a fast flame burst, and this burst caught Fabo was surprised, but it did not cause any significant damage, and she was apparently just resented being compared to a pack mule. His bizarre trial was making reference to the silence or vehicle, and he was a remnant of an original blood red, and he was currently being used by his sister Nadine to punish the second birth ritual or whatever, and being the odd vehicles could easily be repurposed to crack down on human sacrifices. And sacrificial rituals involve the killing of one's own for the purpose of obtaining a desired effect, and the sad fact is that these magic death rituals do work, and to stop them, the side effect must outweigh the benefit gained from a ritual sacrifice, and even without our intervention, such rituals will always remain a curse even if you get what you so desire. Like a bad monkey's paw thing. You get what you want, but it's bad. Bye-bye.